Hello and welcome to Thoughts on Rice, a podcast hosted by the University of California Cooperative Extension Rice Advisors. I'm one of your hosts, Sarah Marsh Janish, and I'm a rice farm advisor for Colusa and Yolo counties.
I'm Whitney from DeForest. I'm the Cooperative Extension Rice Advisor for Sutter, Yuba, Placer, and Sacramento counties.
My name is Luis Espino. I'm the Rice Farming Systems Advisor for Butte and Glenn counties.
I'm Michelle Leinfelder-Miles. I'm a farm advisor in the Delta region. I work on all sorts of field crops, grains and forages, but one of those is rice. And the counties that I cover are San Joaquin, Sacramento, Yolo, Solano, and Contra Costa counties.
Together, the UCCE Rice Farm Advisors seek to provide relevant, topical, research-backed information relating to California rice production. Today, we're continuing the conversation we had last week with Tim Johnson, the president and CEO of the California Rice Commission, or CRC. If you're interested in hearing more about the mission and origins of the California Rice Commission, please go back and listen to that episode before continuing on to this one. Thanks. Do you want to mention any other sustainability projects that the CRC has a hand in?
One of our projects that I'm sure growers are interested in is actually a collaborative project with Ducks Unlimited. So Ducks Unlimited nationwide and here in California is helping the rice industry implement Climate Smart, which, came out of the previous presidential administration, but growers very excited, right? Hey, I do some things on my fields now. I can do some other things that maybe help with greenhouse gas emissions. We've been talking about habitat, but let's talk about the finer points of climate and develop those practices nationally. And then Ducks Unlimited, they're the face that the grower is going to see when they say, I think I'd like to sign up for some of these climate smart practices, be able to capture some of these dollars and be able to utilize them on my farm to reduce climate impacts. What would that look like? They're not going to see somebody from the Rice Commission. They're going to see a staffer from Ducks Unlimited that says, hey, because rice is so important, back to that theme of today, we want to make sure that we're helping growers, right? Make sure that you can maintain that production base, maintain those working ag land. These are some programs that are available to you, and let's work together on that. Some of the other programs that we're very excited about that are related to climate, but in that area where I think rice really has a sweet spot, we can do some things in rice to reduce our greenhouse gas impact. And we'll do those. We're excited about it. But I think our biggest give back on climate is actually species diversity and resilience. Now, let's not forget that as the climate gets drier, there are few places and fewer places for those species to go to have a place to rest, a place to feed, a place to go ahead and continue to thrive. And so we're working with Caltrout, UC Davis, and others to develop some science and some understanding about how rice fields can not only provide that habitat for ducks that I mentioned, but also food for juvenile salmon that would come down the Sacramento River. Programs that would allow us to either grow that zooplankton that lives in our fields when we reflood and you got all that rice straw decomposing, put that back in the river when the salmon are coming down, or most exciting, when the bypasses, which are those areas outside the Sacramento River but away from our cities, it's kind of a way to channel water when the flood waters are high around the cities. Salmon, little baby salmon, are in that water. They're swimming over rice fields. How can we manage those fields so that when that water recedes, they've got this perfect pool with all this food, probably a duck on the top of the water, a baby salmon underneath, eating all that zooplankton while the duck eats the rice. And then we know those fish grow about 3 times bigger. And if we can make sure that when they come onto that rice field, they can swim away easily and don't get kind of stuck, we think we can really help contribute to the rebounding and the recovery of the salmon in the Pacific West. We have 4 runs in California, and we've seen all 4 runs in our field as we do that science with UC Davis. And we're just now wrapping up the last year or 2 of work to make sure that we've got it just right and that growers can sign up for our practices through NRCS to say, look, if I manage my field like this, you help share some of those costs. We think we can deliver for salmon like we've delivered for ducks. And then finally, a little bit of a some people go, ooh, snakes. But I got to tell you, giant garter snakes love rice fields. You've seen them, I'm sure, growing up, right? The big, giant garter snakes.
Huge snakes.
They're like giant. And they're stripy, yellow and black striped. But they're what? They're on the edge of a rice field next to the ditch, right? And so working with UC Davis also to understand, working with U.S. Geologic Survey, which is actually the government science agency that kind of leads giant garter snake research. What about giant garter snakes in rice? What do we know? What do we need to know? How can we do better by giant garter snakes? What we think we know is that having rice present in certain areas is critical. Being able to change some of our practices is also helpful. But really be able to expand out into species beyond just those that we inherited when we stopped burning rice straw, and the work that we've done to expand to other species. And we're just going to keep doing this until we run out. I have to say, though, we have 230 species of wildlife that we know live in rice fields. So we got a long way to go before we run out of species that we can help in rice.
Yeah, that bucket seems almost bottomless. And just for people who really aren't aware, these garter snakes, they're non-venomous, they're not like the water moccasins you see in the Mid-South region. They're not going to hurt you.
They eat frogs, they eat fish, and they'll just look at you and go the other direction. But
exactly.
Quite an impressive snake, and you never think about things like giant garter snakes in rice in the West. You never think about things like yellow rails, right, for rice fields in Louisiana. But really the world needs its managed wetlands, right? It's working ag lands that are wetland-like, and rice certainly fits that need, and that need is increasingly important.
I'd also like, if you have the time, to talk a bit more about the bird programs that the CRC kind of helps coordinate. I know we mentioned them earlier, but if you want to, elaborate a bit more, especially on the shorebird program.
Right. So working with Nature Conservancy and Audubon and others, we've developed a really unique program where dollars that would come from maybe the Department of Fish and Wildlife here in California, dollars that come from our nonprofit partners like Nature Conservancy, maybe even some federal dollars. We want to go flood rice fields. What's the most efficient way to do that? And so what we did working with our partners is develop a system by which growers can enter into a computer portal and say, look, I've got a certain number of acres. Let's say 300 acres this year I would like to flood. I think I can provide winter flooded rice habitat at a certain time of year, but at a cost that looks like this, because every farmer's operating programs are a little different. Their farms are a little different. And so what it allows them to do is to bid on providing that ecosystem service. So you can say, I think I can do it for, let's say, $75. And so a bunch of farmers go put their bids in. And then what you do is you do a reverse auction. The high-priced acres won't be fulfilled as soon as the low-priced acres. So let's say I've got access to really available water. I can manage this in such a way that I can do it at the lower cost. Those acres get filled. Acres that are further away from water or more expensive will then get filled less, or maybe you don't get into the program this year. So it's a very efficient way to be able to take those habitat dollars and stretch them the furthest. it also allows us to target specific flooding practices in specific areas at specific times. If you're a shorebird and you fly over a typically flooded rice field, it's too deep. And it's the middle of winter and there's water everywhere. You probably don't have a habitat deficit. But when you came in October and there weren't flooded rice fields and the national refuges didn't have their water out on their landscape yet, you really need habitat. So we've developed programs that go through that same computer portal to be able to say, growers that may be harvested early in September could get that water on. They think, oh, I can start doing my habitat practices now. And you go in and you sign up and you bid on very targeted times of year for very specific durations, for very specific depths, both in the spring and then also in the fall, like we've been talking about. So it really allows us to fine tune the practices that we have on our fields, be able to really greatly enhance the dollars that are spent on specific habitat. And then we also know where those acres are at in the programs, and the biologists then go out and confirm, right, through field observations. Oftentimes, in the case of shorebirds, also trapping programs. We trap the birds, maybe put some GPS devices on them. How are those birds using those fields? It's really become a way that growers can say, CRC may be helping us on something like the Farm Bill, but the CRC is also helping us navigate, sign up for, understand, consult on these habitat programs. Are now becoming an important part of my winter, and maybe the most important part of my winter on my farm, and really be able to think about their farm in that fullness of the season, not just the growing season, but also those shoulder seasons where we can provide this great habitat. And we've actually hired a biologist from Point Blue Conservation Sciences, Kristen. We're the only sort of commodity group that I know of that has a real published living biologist on our staff to help us, help our farmers, right, and help the public really understand the benefits to rice fields, and especially for those birds, not just ducks, but also other birds that we might have in our fields.
Expanding the range of bird access, which is, just increasing that number of wildlife species in the rice fields.
Right. We just have such a great opportunity in a state that needs wetlands back, right? 95% gone. Where can we find a wetland? When we can do that? Well, the reality is we have 500,000 acres that farmers manage, as you know, every single year, just to absolute precision to grow a rice crop. That same mentality, those same fields, that same systems to say, you want 2 inches of water on that field in September or October? I can do that. I got you, right? If you need late water after I might drain the rest of my fields, I got you. I can do that. And that's really taking that ingenuity of farmers that we talked about, kind of jumping in and solving problems in a very proactive way, rather than waiting until we get a listing on a species or great public concern. And it's really farmers, in this case, rice farmers, working with the NGO community, our government entities. We couldn't do this without Department of Fish and Wildlife. We couldn't do it without NRCS. We couldn't do it without USGS in the case of giant garter snake, right? You think U.S. Geologic Survey, they do snakes. They're awesome on snakes, and they know all the things that you need to know about snakes. And as we then develop programs there, really connect the farmer with the nonprofit, with the government, and solve a problem, much like we've been trying to do in the Sacramento Valley with water districts and NGOs like Caltrout and science like at UC Davis on salmon. I think in 10 years, if we were to have this conversation, it's going to be, we grow rice, we grow birds, we grow salmon, And we're 90% of the way there on giant garter snake. And what a difference from that time where the pressure was about not burning rice straw to now being able to think, well, we don't have to get all that about this other stuff because we can do some things about it today. We can go out and provide Pacific flyway habitat. We can do giant garter snake stuff. We can weigh into the really hard space, work with people who are already smart on salmon and say, well, this is a rice field. How can we work together to figure out how we can make that better for concerns that impact every person in California, not just folks in Colusa?
Exactly. So we'll have this conversation again in 10 years, and that'll be the topic of conversation.
Yes.
With that, Tim, I think we're going to start to wrap up. Are there any upcoming events with the CRC or associated partners that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, we have a great grower meeting every year. This year it's January 15th. We'll have 2 sessions. We'll have a session in Colusa. We'll also have a session in Yuba City. And you can find that. We send out cards to the industry. We also have a really great website that we keep growers updated on. It's called calricenews.org. And that's where all we put our calendar out there, all sign up for programs, all information that would impact growers, farm bill, progress, etc. So come to our grower meeting on the 15th. You get an opportunity to talk about the farm bill. We'll talk about the rice footprint. We'll talk about some really cutting-edge digital communications efforts that Katie in our office has been undertaking. Again, really kind of unique and hugely impactful activities that reach beyond, the 9 rice counties where we grow a crop to people who aren't going to have that exposure, but really some exciting work there. And also hear about, state policies as well that may be coming up and impacting us. So great meeting for growers, great meeting for people interested in rice in the state.
Excellent. And yeah, I went to the one last year and it was incredibly informative, especially at the beginning of my job, just jumping into it. It was a great dose of, okay, this is what's going on. And with that, how should people contact the CRC? Should they do that through the website?
Yeah, go to calrice.org if you want to contact us. You've got access to all of what we call our experts. You've got a bird question, you can ask bird questions. And, if you ever get around to needing a CEO question, you find me there too. For everyday news, like I said, calricenews.org. And that'll be more kind of grower-specific information to you, but you can also reach us there as well.
Perfect. And then, so for context, I was on a podcast recently, and the Filthy Spoon, for anybody who's interested, it was a great time. But so the guys there, they're real pros, and they recommend doing a send-off question at the end of the podcast just to kind of close things up. So with that, Tim, what is your favorite rice or rice variety and why?
Oh, so actually goes back to a real specific moment I remember. Brown Koshiakari.
That is so specific.
It is. I'm not a real big brown rice guy, but brown Koshiakari for me has that perfect, nice, chewy texture. You get the nuttiness of the brown rice. I just love it. It is fantastic. That is my favorite rice. If you had to say of all of these, go eat that one, it's that. Of course, it's got to be grown in California.
Of course.
And it got to be grown in California. Beyond that, I would have to say I came to this industry knowing nothing about rice. I love Calrose. I mean, what a diverse, great rice. Whether I'm making a paella, I'm just steaming rice. I'm going in and getting some sushi at McCooney's or something like that. Man, you get some Calrose. It is what California rice is, right? We are Calrose around the world. How can you not love Calrose?
I agree with you. I think I was talking to somebody from Hawaii last week, and they told me specifically they only buy California rice. Specifically look for it in the stores. They don't care how much it costs in Hawaii. That's what they're getting.
All that loco moco, right? Spam musubi, Calrose.
Oh, yeah. Well, Tim, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I think I think everybody's going to be really interested in hearing what you had to say today.
Thank you, Sarah, for the opportunity. Thank you for the work that UC Extension does on behalf of rice and all of agriculture. You guys make us better. Thank you.
Well, we're grateful to get to work with people like the CRC in order to try and serve the community and the industry as much as we can. This is a new segment for us on the podcast that we're actually really excited about. And this is where we'll be answering your questions, the questions that have been submitted to us through the feedback form, through an email, through a text message link. Basically, any way that you can get in contact with us, we will answer it. And so this is a question that actually relates to this episode and the previous episode. And it comes from Keller. And the question is, who funds the California Rice Commission staff and programs? That's a great question, Keller, and that's one that we really didn't touch on in this conversation with Tim and I. But to answer this question, the California Rice Commission is fully funded by the rice industry. It does operate through oversight by the California State Department of Food and Ag, but the funding for the Rice Commission comes from the industry. What that means is that rice growers and marketers of rice in California pay an assessment towards the commission, which then provides a stable source of income for the California Rice Commission. And the reason why there are these mandatory fees in the rice industry in California is to provide a consistent income in order to conduct the monitoring in support of the programs that Tim and I talked about, as well as the rice pesticides program and other regulatory programs in the industry. And due to this assessment, this percentage of the rice crop, the commission is actually in a really unique position to manage water quality programs and help develop and implement practices to ensure compliance with regulatory standards. And so that's the answer to that question. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out. But again, thank you so much for your question. And if anybody has any other questions or comments or concerns, feel free to use any of the aforementioned or soon to be mentioned in our closing methods of communicating with us so that we can talk with you. Again, thank you. We have a few upcoming rice meetings in the new year. As you know, we'll be having our rice winter grower meetings in February. And so we have a series of meetings. They all have the same agenda. Don't go to every single meeting. You'll be awfully bored. But pick the one that's closest to you or most convenient to you, and attend that one. So the first one will be the Woodland meeting, which will take place February 10th at 8 a.m. The location for that will be the Yolo County Farm Bureau office. The second meeting will be the Richvale meeting, which will take place February 12th at 8 a.m. The location of that is the Richvale Evangelical Church. The Willows meeting will be that same day, February 12th, at 1 p.m., and that location will be the Glenn County Office of Education. The Calusa meeting will take place February 13th at 8 a.m. in the CIP conference room. And the Yuba City meeting will take place that same day again, February 13th at 1 p.m., and that'll be in the Veterans Hall. For more information about meeting times and locations or addresses and agendas, please feel free to look at our resources online. That'll include the UC Rice blog and the UC Agronomy website, or feel free to call your local extension office for more information. In terms of other resources that you might take advantage of, you can also look at our newsletters, which include Rice Briefs, which covers Calusa Yolo, Rice Notes, which covers Yuba Sutter, Rice Leaf, which covers Butte and Glen, and Field Notes, which takes care of rice in the Delta region of California. Thanks for listening to Thoughts on Rice, a University of California Cooperative Extension podcast from the University of California Agriculture and Natural Resources. You can find out more about this podcast on our website, thoughtsonrice.buzzsprout.com. We'd love to hear from you, whether it's from using our text link in the show notes, a survey submission in our feedback form, also in the show notes, or in a comment or rating on your podcast streaming service of choice. We're also experimenting with polls on Spotify, so if you're listening on Spotify, you might have an option to answer some of those questions, and we might be able to talk about that on the air. You can also email us with any comments, questions, or concerns at thoughtsonrice@ucdavis.edu. We're glad to have you here for Season 2 of the Thoughts on Rice podcast. And remember, like the growers like to say, have a rice life. Mention of an agrochemical does not constitute a recommendation, merely the sharing of research findings. Always follow the label. The label is the law. Find out more at ipm.ucanr.edu. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own, and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of the University of California. The material and information presented here is for general purposes only. The University of California name and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service.